Mark Turrner is an LA native whose extraordinary technical ability and subtle tone have set a new standard for saxophonists in the field of improvisational jazz. Turrner's artistry is widely admired, inspiring the next generation with his mastery and humility. Rather than seeking the spotlight for himself, he centers his attention on the music and what it communicates. Welcome to another episode of Strictly Jazz Sounds. I'm your host, Steve Browngen. Today we focus on the remarkable saxophonist Mark Turrner and his latest project, Reflections on an Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man, drawing upon the work of James Weldon Johnson, a renowned African-American activist, author, and poet, using Johnson's narrative as a foundation for his musical interpretations. This project is a collaboration between Turrner and Jimmy Katz, the founder of Giant Step Arts in New York City. Giant Step Arts is a nonprofit organization devoted to supporting innovative jazz musicians and providing a platform for original performances. Mark Turrner is among the distinguished artists that Katz and the organization have championed. Turrner's musical journey is deeply shaped by the rich R&B and jazz traditions he experienced growing up, as well as the influential sounds of jazz saxophonists from the 1950s and 60s, such as Sonny Rollins, Sonny Stitt, John Coltrane, Warne Marsh, and Harold Land. These legendary musicians have been key sources of inspiration for him. Despite his own talent, Turrner remains strikingly modest, often downplaying praise of his abilities. A significant aspect of our discussion of Turrner's latest album, Reflections on an Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man, is its exploration of his own experiences as an African American. The conversation in this episode delves into how these experiences, ranging from his time in school, on school buses, and in predominantly white neighborhoods, influence both his life and his music. Our discussion with Turrner is rich with insights into his compositional approach and the thematic elements present in his 10-part suite. The suite addresses issues of identity, race, and historical context, offering listeners a thoughtful and engaging musical journey. Turrner also shares his artistic aspirations, including a forthcoming project inspired by the works of Octavia Butler, with hopes to collaborate again with Giant Step Arts. Thanks to Jimmy Katz and Giant Step Arts, we are pleased to present 4 movements from this powerful work for your enjoyment. The quintet features Mark Turrner on tenor sax and narration, Jason Palmer on trumpet, David Varela is on piano and prophet and organ, Matt Brewer on acoustic and electric bass, and Nasheet Waite on drums. We have 4 tracks for you. The first one is Movement 1, Anonymous. The second, Movement 4, New York. The third, Movement 9, Identity Politics. And the last one, Closure, which is Movement 10. Thank you for joining this podcast and choosing to spend your time listening to Strictly Jazz Sounds among the many other options that are available for you. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so to receive updates on future episodes, jazz news, and the annual Top 20 Jazz playlist, which is forthcoming. This episode begins with Movement 1. I hope you enjoy the conversation and the music that follows. This is Steve Browngen.
I think I find a sort of savage and diabolical desire to gather up all the little tragedies of my life and turn them into a practical joke on society. And two, I suffer a vague feeling of unsatisfaction, of regret, of almost remorse, from which I am seeking relief, and of which I'll speak in the last paragraph of this account.
Mark Turrner, we are here to have a conversation with you about you and your work, the music that you do, and the directions that you're going. And I am personally honored to have this conversation with you because, as everybody seems to say, you are the guide today. First, if you will, share a little bit about your background. You're in the LA area now.
Yes.
You live in LA, but that's not where everything started. I'm in Columbus, Ohio, and you started in Ohio.
I did, yeah. First of all, I don't know who the guy is, but it's definitely not me. There are a lot of guys and gals who are great. And I'm definitely honored to be here. It's great. I'm happy to talk about music. Yeah, I was born in Ohio, actually not far from Columbus, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I'm sure you know where that is.
You bet.
My father, now deceased, since I was very young, was in the Air Force. He was a navigator, engineer, and so that's why I was born there. And yeah, then my mother remarried soon after, and 69, 70, we moved to Los Angeles. So I basically grew up here in Los Angeles.
Sure.
That's basically it. That's all the stuff. Went to school, blah, 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 you know.
Music was an important part for you, it seems like. You had a lot of stuff going on in the household. You had jazz playing, you had R&B. When people talk about influenced you, it looks like the entire milieu influenced you.
Yeah, I would say that's true. So, yeah, my parents were especially actually both my fathers, so my biological father and my stepfather were, I think they were both music enthusiasts or lovers. So my dad had both, so I have actually, I don't know if you can see some of my records over there. You see that?
Oh, yeah.
So those are some of them. And the other ones are upstairs. But a lot of my records were actually my dad's record.
Oh,
So both actually. My biological father was a Sonny Stitt fan, so I had a fair amount of Sonny Stitt records. Gene Ammons record, and then they had a Rollins the Bread, a few Coltrane records from the 50s, Miles records from the 50s, the Dizzy Gillespie, Eternal Triangle, Sunny Side of the Street, all those tunes. Those are the first records I heard, jazz records. I didn't know anything else but those. And then a bunch of, my dad played a lot of R&B. So it's probably 80% R&B, 20% jazz. So that was it in the house and in the car.
Yeah.
Driving around Southern California. So,
that's the place.
Yeah, that's the music I heard most of the time.
The jazz scene, though, in LA was an interesting one during the 70s, 60s and 70s. There was this surge that was very different than what was going on the East Coast. And you became quite interested in it. One musician I kept seeing was one that inspired you, and Warne was a very important figure for you. I want to talk about those kinds of figures, but also John Coltrane.
Yeah.
And Coltrane is my favorite.
Yeah.
I played sax
Agreed.
for a little bit. Agreed.
Yeah.
Yes, that was easy.
Yeah, overall. Yeah, of course. I'm not going to deny that.
Of course. And it influences your work substantially. Why don't you talk about the LA scene? Because I honestly don't think that there is enough written and talked about the LA scene. What is going on there and how that influences your work?
Honestly, I hate to be a slight disappointment, but I mean, it's like trying to play jazz. I can't say I knew a lot about the LA scene at the time. So that was the early 80s.
Okay.
I was in high school. I wasn't going out to clubs. I was 14 or 15. I knew about it a little bit, just from hearing from other people who were older than I was, who could go out and hear music. Yes, I did know about Warne Marsh. I knew about, I can say historically, I knew about Ornette Coleman. I knew about Lester Gordon. The list goes on. There are other people. I knew about Harold Band. So I'm just mentioning saxophone players who would influence me actually later. But I didn't, I was young. I didn't have a historical reference or understanding really of that until later. If it influenced me, I would say maybe just because I was in proximity, and maybe because I will say something, this is in retrospect, from being from LA and I'll say this too, this is related to what you're saying, but maybe tangential, is that the whole migration. So my biological father was from Louisiana. And there's a lot of musicians from LA, but their ancestry was from the South. A lot of them came from Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana. A lot of those people, their parents, their grandparents. I don't know what it is, but there's something about, especially LA, and the musicians that came from there. There's something about the way they play the blues, something about the way they swing, something about their access of, I'll say, African diasporic music. I don't know what it is. Somehow it has the West. It has, I'll just say, has tumbleweeds in it. I don't know what it is, but there's some vibe in there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
I don't know what it is. It's different than the East Coast. It's different than the Midwest.
Yeah.
It's different than Midwest, Chicago and surrounding areas, including Kansas City and all that. It's different. I was attracted to that anyway, even after I left Los Angeles. So I'll just say that, if that makes sense.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. For my listeners, Warne Marsh was a substantial figure for you, it seems anyway, based off of...
Yeah, it's true. He was,
absolutely.
We can go into that later if you want, but yeah.
Yeah. But so New York, But you were at Berkeley before then, and you got your degree from Berkeley College of Music in Boston.
I did, yeah.
As a way of summing up before you jumped into the scene professionally. And so you were in New York. What I'm curious to talk about before I get into the album that you just released is the time that you spent in Europe. And to be honest, I was not that familiar with your time in Europe. I'm familiar with the music, but in terms of what your time in Europe was about for you, personally, as well as professionally, but what was the draw for you in Europe to spend the energy that you did, the time that you did in Europe, and to really pour yourself into the work that was being done, particularly at ECM Records?
I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for that. Part of it would be just practical. I think a lot of, I'll just say this, which is maybe obvious, but a lot of American musicians tour in Europe. A lot of work is there. In fact, I would say for a touring jazz musician, there's probably more work there than there is here. So I'll just say that is number one. I think that's true. I think most people would admit that. Not that there isn't work here, but in terms of touring nowadays, that's the case. For various reasons, you can talk about this later. And maybe the other is that I have relationships with European musicians because I was interested in what some of them were doing, and they were kind enough to hire me. I think there were, how can I say, sometimes there was a similar aesthetic to share with them and things to learn about music that maybe I wouldn't have learned in the US. Certain things about music making in general, not necessarily jazz, but just about music. So I'll say Western music.
Such as what? I'm curious about that.
Okay, two things. One, from a European perspective, reflecting on another tradition. So let's say if you're a European music person and you're listening to a tradition that comes from the Americas. So when I say the Americas, all the music that came out of North America, South America, and the Caribbean, and they're refracting it to their culture. So that's what happens generally, right? You listen to same thing with classical music coming to the US. It's different than classical music in Europe, for example.
Sure.
If you take the American composers, it still sounds like culture music, but it's not the same. It's not something that a European composed, for example. So even though many of them are European descent. Okay, it's a long discussion. But anyway, about the way some of them approach music, what they approach American music, that I found interesting. And generally, that tends to be melodic and harmonic oriented, less about rhythm in general. It's not a criticism. It's just that's where they're culturally at.
That's what it is, yeah. Sure.
Yeah, that's European music is mostly, that's usually in melody and form. So, yeah, I learned a lot of things about that, how those things are addressed, how they can be addressed it could be in a cinematic sense, how harmony is, I don't know, how long phrases need to be to make harmonic sense. There's all kinds of details about that, about how to make melodies sing. Because that's the European tradition. There's a lot about that, just that stuff alone.
That really plays out in your music quite well. And for a lot of people who don't understand that, it seems to me that you can spend a lot of time, particularly with ECM. I mean, there are many other labels that are available for people to catch other musicians from really all of Europe. Because for folks who don't realize this, jazz is everywhere.
It's everywhere, absolutely.
It is everywhere. And so
agreed.
The work that you're doing, and this is why I agree that you're an important figure today, you're contributing considerably to the music form in not only in Europe, it's now obviously in the United States, but the way that you approach this, the way I'm hearing it, there's a lot of stacking of the chords and the structure. You build up on it. You obviously have partners with this in this current album, Jason Palmer, as well
Yeah.
as your quartet. You find partners in building up this structure with it, and then you lay it out. I hear this build up in your music, and then you cats just let this thing go, and then you come back. I'm trying to create an image here, but I'm not too sure how successful I am in doing that.
Well,
But that's
great.
what
I
it comes
like
up
it.
to
Why
me.
not?
No, you and Jason Palmer, who plays trumpet, has played trumpet with you for quite some time. We're going to talk about your latest outing, Reflections on the Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man by James Weldon Johnson. But you and Jason Palmer, you guys have this partnership, this very special relationship. You're like a tandem pair when it comes to playing. Why don't you talk about Jason Palmer and how important he has been to the work that you have been doing, and or maybe how important he is to the work that both of you have been doing together.
Jason is, yeah, he's important because, or why I hired him. He's a fantastic trumpet player, but the question is in what way?
Yeah.
Anyone could say that, but I find it to be very specific. He constructs his music methodically, meaning the way he's practiced, the way he thinks about it, how he's worked on music, so on and so forth over the years. That's important because if you want to talk about stacking, building scaffolding, you start on something with the bass, then you build something else, over time. I find that's how I work because I'm not talented. So I have to work on things. You have to think about them. I may like something, but I have to actually think about it in order to be able to implement it into my ears, my body, my mind, and eventually physically an instrument. I think Jason has a similar quality. He's relentless, an assassin on the trumpet. He's just very strong. No, he's very good at building a solo. He pays attention to details of playing, such as articulation, timbre, sound, dynamics. Not everyone does that in jazz. Sometimes certain people play only at a certain volume.
Yeah.
All the time. No, it's true. I'm just saying, and that's fine. I'm not so interested in that. But that's what instruments have. You do have timbre, volume, changing the volume, all that. That's what you have. It's one of the that you need to present your music emotionally to the public. So he has all those things, range. He has the ability to play a large range on the instrument, meaning large intervals on trumpet. He plays changes great. He's a great reader. He has fantastic time. All those qualities are necessary, at least for me, to play the music that I want to play with another horn player.
And it's obvious that he really hears you. He hears you, he understands you, he understands the music that you're doing.
Yes, yeah, I think we have a simpatico happening here.
That's the term, simpatico.
Yes, there's a thing why it's important,
So he's an important part of this latest project that you've done. Let's turn to that because there's a whole lot to talk about that. So the latest project, as I mentioned before, Reflections on the Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man. This was a book that was written by James Weldon Johnson, and this was a project that was also done by Giant Step Arts. How and when did you first come across this book, and what was it about you that spoke to you and eventually compelled you to do a project around this?
I just ran into the book by chance, just because I was doing a little bit of African American study on my own at the time, and I still do a little bit off and on, but just trying to read about African American history. I didn't really get into school, so there's a lot of things I didn't know then, and I still don't know now. So I was at the Schomburg Center in Harlem. Maybe my wife and I were taking our kids there or something like that. For whatever reason, we were there. They had a selection of books. I just picked them up. There was a sort of, when I say selection books, there was a package of 3 or 4 historical books. So I just picked them up and then I read them. And one of them was Autobiography of an ex-colored man. So I read and I found out what it was about. And it was about a Black individual who can pass for someone of European descent. And so that intrigued me. So first of all, the title intrigued me. Second, I knew who James Wilder Johnson was. I didn't know he wrote novels. So that was intriguing. My mother can pass. And my two, I guess they would be great aunts. So basically they're the sisters of my great grandfather, could pass. And they actually did what the protagonist does. So they married to a man of European descent and left the family. So nobody knows. That's another branch of the family that's gone. So, and obviously my mother did not make that decision. So that was it. It's an interesting subject. I knew about it just from talking about it in the family, but I didn't know people actually wrote about it in public. So I'll just add to that. That's what brought me to it. In terms of music, I was looking for another catalyst for writing music. Normally, as people use a lot of reasons to write, but I would say the majority of us say, okay, I'm just going to write a tune. You might have, I'm going to write a blues. I'm going to write a contrafat. I'm going to write an original that has a vamp and has some changes or has an AAV form, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
No, I'm not trying to joke around, but the majority of you might have recent things you want to start with, melodies that you like. And of course, we're all emotional beings. Of course, there's feeling and emotion in it, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's less directional than another situation like this. So this was more directional. I wanted to have, like I said, of course, there are feelings and emotions. We write music, or sometimes the feelings come once we start the melodies, then we have feelings about them, right? It comes from all kinds of places.
Sure.
So I decided I would like to start with a book that has some cultural or emotional psycho-spiritual value to me. And from that, I will start to write music. Maybe basically the prose will direct what the music is going to be.
Yeah.
So that was the beginning. I used that as something like that. At first, I was not going to have any, read any passages. It was just something to start to write music, to shape music. And then it developed over time. So that's the beginning.
So how did you decide to read the text from this novel, and how did you decide what text to read from this novel?
So that was difficult to figure out. It took time. I had to go back through the novel and find all categorize the different sections of the novel, not just the chapters, of course, because when I first wrote the thing or started working on it, I divided it into 11 chapters, just 11 pieces of music, just like the book, and it ended up being 10, although one of them is sort of 2 themes in one. So it's still sort of like 11, but I use that as a framework. Okay. So I decided the spur of the moment. I was on a tour and I knew that I was about to play. This is back in 2018. We were about to perform it at the Vanguard. And I was thinking about, I was just thinking about how the music will be arranged, which tunes, what order they're going to be in. I had that already. And then I thought, man, it would be very interesting if there are a few words that would probably enhance the music somehow. That was my first thought. Just a little bit. I'm not saying it should completely theatrical, but there is a bit of theater as soon as you have words, even let's say folkloric music, like popular music that most of it has words. There's a theatrical element. If you notice, if you see any pop act, anybody, when I say pop, I just mean not jazz music, just something where there's a singer. There's always a theatrical element. I'm not saying they're an actor, but there's that. I just said, that would be interesting if there are just a few words to just bring some other context to the music. And so it was kind of for the moment. So then I had to just comb through the book to figure out what would work. So I didn't want basically with words. not words enhanced with music. So basically that means there's not too many words, not too many statements. And the statements need to be short and provocative. Provocative meaning potent.
You bet.
I was looking for those, the most potent statements that also had something to do with what the book was actually saying, at least to me. So that worked
What you
for me.
wanted to say. You
Yeah,
were
what
trying to say something there. Yeah.
yeah, partially what I would say it's somewhere in between what I think the book was saying and also what I gleaned from the book personally.
I see.
That make more sense?
You bet. The text is really powerful, and I think it gets at what you had shared before about passing. Couple of, how can I put this? Let's see here. A couple segments that you have. It starts off with in movement one, anonymous. You set up the whole project this way. And it begins with Matt Brewer on bass, then rolls into synthesizer with David Bareilles,
Yeah.
which then leads
All
to
right.
the narrative opening of the suite, which can be found in chapter one.
Yeah, that's right.
Your voiceover leads to the melodic theme of this suite,
Yeah,
and
that's
then
right.
closes with drummer Nashit Waits demonstrating what I called a fitful, emotive introduction to the suite.
Very cool. Right. Kurt. All about the rhythm section.
Nashit Waits. How did Nashit Waits and Matt Brewer become a part of this project?
That's
And
exciting.
David
Yeah.
Varelas. I forgot to mention David. So how did you select them to be part of this?
I just basically I called them to play in 2018. We did this thing. And then later on approached me to do something. And I said, hey, I'd like to record this. That's basically it. They did a fantastic job playing the music that I wrote. I think
Yeah.
there's there.
Yeah.
So yeah. So to answer your question, for me, it's always simple. I call people based on their personality. Of course, their abilities, or obviously they're high level musician. I just think about people based on their personalities, who's going to work together. I usually write music for people. When I wrote the music, I was already thinking about them. I usually don't write music and then just say anybody can play it. I have a hard time hearing that. So even if they play the notes right, it's not right. They have to play with a certain kind of personality, meaning the way they play, the way they swing, the way they play rhythm. For piano players, there's a certain kind of voice leading, how they come, their touch on the instrument, so on and so forth. So all those musical details matter to me personally. Yeah, the answer your question is I called them because I wrote the music for them before I even called them.
Oh, that's special.
I had a relationship with them already. Yes, we played together. I
Yeah.
actually don't call people who I haven't played before with.
Did they have any contribution to make to what texts were selected for this, or was that all you?
That was all me.
So you guys didn't sit in some quiet
No.
room together and have everybody with their books out and didn't.
No, sorry. Maybe I should have done it that way. It would have probably been easier. But no, I made all those decisions myself. Yeah.
Sometimes it's easier to just do it yourself, which you did.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should have delegated.
I think, given the quality of the project, I think you did fine. I'm going to get back into it in movement two, juxtaposition. That these titles of the movements, I'm curious about them and what you meant by them. We can look it up in terms of the definition of the word. But based off of the text that you have in here, when you talk about how Southern whites claim they love Negroes better than Northern whites do, and in a manner, it's true. I love that first sentence.
Yeah.
But
And
so do I do
we
too.
all know what I'm talking about. I kind of went in based on my own life experience. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's absolutely what I was going to ask is what was it that compelled you to select these types of texts? And you just answered that question. Is what you think, is what you believe.
These are things I believe. There's things that I've experienced in my own life. when I read the book, I just thought, wow, this is still, everything he's writing is true right now.
It
Okay,
is.
sometimes the context has changed. Sometimes what has happened in the past is, let's say, more forceful or harder than it is now. Maybe it's a softer version now of some things, but they're still there. But I'll just add this, which is part of why I'm saying what I'm saying. Part of the reason why I picked some of the texts is that I was born in 65. So when I was a kid, I was, it was right after civil rights. I was a child while things were changing, meaning the laws had changed, but people don't change with laws so quickly.
No,
And
they don't.
for example, I used to, even in California, or when my parents decided to take, they were young, they were in their 30s, and I think along with many of their friends in Ohio, they wanted to move out to California. They wanted to exercise their full rights as, let's say, African-American citizens who have rights to be fully involved in the, U.S. economy as it stands. They grew up in, I think many people in their generation, they grew up in Black neighborhoods, couldn't do anything else. And frankly, maybe that was better for them. That's another discussion. But anyway, I grew up in a different situation. They said, hey, we can move in. Okay, I grew up in mostly neighborhoods of European descent. They did it because they could. And they said, hey, the schools are great here. I can do this. Let's do it. Bam. They went in. And so I experienced the break. So the people, frankly, a lot of them did not want to stay. I can't say how many times the N-word I was called getting on the school bus, coming up from school. Okay, it's just name calling. So fine. Not that big a deal, actually. But that wouldn't, it's rarely, okay, now maybe it does happen more often, but that, not so much. Also, I used to go see my grandparents every other summer, and I would see my grandmother in the South. Actually, the same thing in Ohio, but in the South, I went in 1971. Okay, civil rights had just been passed. You think it was different in Western Ohio? Okay, it's northern Louisiana, western Louisiana.
No.
A small rural town in between Monroe and Shreveport. Things haven't changed that much. It was basically people were, okay, we have to follow these laws, but we don't want to, meaning the white people. So basically, that statement is that. And there are plenty of altruistic people of European today. I think they did a lot of good things, but I don't think they wanted people like me around them. They don't want to hang out. Anyway, sorry, I don't mean to.
No, you put it right, though.
I'm not even blaming. I'm just saying that's what I grew up with. Anyway, so on and so forth. Go ahead.
I lived in Columbus when I was a kid. My parents moved us here when I was 3.
Yeah.
And my father had a church here. He was an Episcopal priest. And in 68, he moved us to Nashville just a few months after King's assassination.
Okay, that's it. Yeah, there you go. That's exactly what I'm talking
about. That's why I'm smiling, because I get it.
Yeah, I know you get it.
I heard it. I saw it. I was in it. I had guys who tried to run my twin brother and I when we were hitchhiking on Broad Street, or I was working in a fast food restaurant and some guy pulled a knife out because I was working with some white employees.
Yeah.
And he didn't like the fact that I was there.
There you go.
That's the way it was. So what you selected talked to me for sure.
Yeah.
And so this is a real insightful thing that you're sharing. So juxtaposition, let's go back to that. Why did you call it that?
It's just that juxtaposition, I'll just say 2 different viewpoints. One from European people of European descent in the U.S. about what then was called the race question. You could still talk about it now. The race question or the cultural question of people who are not of European descent. What's their place in society? How do we feel about them on either side? How do we feel about them? What do they get? What do they not get? Are we going to let them or not let them in? How far are we going to let them in? Which group gets more than the other group? Why should they get more? Should they get more? There's all kinds of details if you want to. It's still true now. So that's what I mean, the two different viewpoints. Those who are very altruistic, who may not have as much contact with people of color, various people of color. How do they feel about it?
Yeah.
What do they think? What do they think when people of color become closer in proximity to them? Do they feel like, I'm just saying, so all those kinds of things, what's going on? And the people who maybe are clear about their opposition to that, in some ways I appreciate it. At least I know I know where you stand.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole gray area of people. I don't know where they stand. Who knows what's going on? Anyway, so I won't go into it's a long discussion, but just two viewpoints and all the gradations in between. What do they mean in our society? How they played out historically, especially the last 125 years? How they affect the actors, all the actors involved, people who have been here for the last 200, 300 years, recent immigrants. How do they feel about this history? Do they know anything about it? How do they feel about it? Do they know anything about it?
Yeah.
Do they realize the benefits that they get because of what other people have done? I would say, to give them the rights and freedoms that they get now, so on and so forth. There's all kinds of details, but that's what that is. If you think about it, there's a whole wash of things that are in our society that maybe need to be thought about, addressed. Of course they are. We're still working out.
Now the music in the suite theme is laid out.
Yes.
It's very melodic, and it's like this really introduces you to the musical theme. And I listened to it quite a number of times in order to really feel what you were trying to lay out. So let's go to movement 3. I love that title, Pulmonary Edema, basically because I've had it.
Oh, you did? Okay. Wow.
Yeah. Yes. So you open up this movement, and basically it's a duet between you and David. And what are you communicating with this sonic interlude?
Okay, I can't say everything because obviously the reason why I'm a musician is because there are plenty of things you can't communicate with words. So that's number one.
David was great in this.
Yeah, he was.
He's amazing. His work in it. And his work on synth is really amazing on this album.
Yeah, it's incredible. So a lot of these pieces are trying to address more than one thing because they can't address everything necessarily with one song. So part of this is and it's not necessarily in order, but basically this is the point where the protagonist witnesses a lynching, and he decides, okay, you know what, this is too much for me. Basically, I maybe he's ashamed to be of African descent, afraid, I don't know what, but he decides, you know what, I'm going to go back to New York. I'm going to change my name and live my life out as I'm just going to pass for the rest of my life. That's what he does. So that's the point where he's witnessing. So it's a reference to what happens in the book, and just historically, people would be sometimes burned. So burned to the stake, or burnt, people would put gasoline oil on someone and burn them and then hang them. But you experience a pulmonary edema when you're burned alive.
Yeah.
Or sometimes they're burned afterwards. So I think in this case in the book, I think his body is burned afterwards.
Yeah.
It's just a reference to that. This is something that happens. Lynchings happen quite a bit in different forms for different reasons. He can pass for white, so he witnesses it. He hears about it and he goes over to what's going on. So it's a intimate moment to take time and take a look at something that's horrific, it's complex. It's a complex moment. Extreme hatred, taking the life of someone who many people in a community love and admire. Yeah. So what does that mean? What does that do to a human being? And over time, something like that is considered anathema. You wouldn't do that nowadays. But at another time in history, it's perfectly allowed. That's interesting. What's up with that?
It's not expected.
That's just how time is. That's how history works. So anyway, that's what this piece is about. Just about time, history, how people view others, even to the extent that they'll consider them animal and think that they can take their life. Not just take their life, but in a horrific demarched a painful way, so on and so forth.
So in movement
yeah.
4, it's entitled New York. This is also an instrumental. You have David on organ and synthesizer.
Yeah.
Sounds like an ocean liner's horns. And then some dissonance is followed by melodic composition. At least that's how I'm interpreting that.
Great. I like it. I'm not going to direct it. I love it. You know, that's what it's all about. Just put it out there and people feel how they feel about it.
So he lays it out. Then the full quintet chimes in. Jason Palmer does his thing. And David wraps it up on piano, backing Nasheed Waits on drums.
Yeah.
And he does it in a fashion with repetition. What I felt was no resolution. I didn't feel that the repetitive phrasing didn't have a resolution to it. It just kept going and going until the closing chord at the end. That piece, I think, is one of the most powerful ones for me. That particular movement was very powerful for me.
Okay, good. Cool. I like.
Yeah, I liked it too. And so movement 5, Europe. Oh, now you really get into this. You're in the meat of this. And so the music begins with synthesizer again. David serving as what I call the sonic interpretation of the protagonist's uncertainty in making the decision to leave his millionaire. He doesn't say millionaire friend, just calls him his millionaire or the millionaire. And then David is solo on the piano, selecting keys and chords, reflecting the text, and then David plays, he's discordant, and then he leads into the final ensemble performance of the suite's theme. That's how I'm seeing that. Talk about, if you will, for a couple minutes, this particular movement, because I think this is critical in the book, but you also lay it out as a very important segment of your project.
So yeah, basically protagonist has a patron benefactor that he travels with. This is the Gilded Age. He meets him in New York. They're traveling in Europe and they're about to go to Japan. And the protagonist wants to, as you probably already know, he's a accomplished piano player. While he's in New York, if you want to call him like a first call ragtime piano player, he's playing in this club. Yeah. And that's where he meets the millionaire from he starts playing engagements outside the club. Anyway, he meets them, they're there. And it's the first time he has a discussion with him about race, about who he is, his identity. He wants to go back to the US and explore what he calls Negro themes, basically what eventually becomes jazz. I'm assuming that. He wants to get into Negro spirituals, which becomes gospel. He wants to get into ragtime and all that, which we all know what happens eventually. Yeah. So he wants to get into that. And he wants to dignify the Negro race with the music. And the millionaire is telling him, listen, you're wasting your time. He's also expressing his feelings about all the different groups, particularly about race and what happened in the Civil War. And so he has a completely different take on the race question than other people in the book. So he's expressing that there. So the Europe song is, if you notice in the beginning, it presents the beginning theme is presented again in a different key, and that develops into the rest of the tune. So that beginning theme is the A section, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, that's a good way.
So that's the whole thing. It's just his relationship with the millionaire at this point in his life, where his relationship with the millionaire in New York and in Europe, and his eventual transition to going back to the U.S. Why he decides to do that. It's also about his research that he does. There's a point where he goes back to the U.S. and he goes to the South and he does some research, sort of musicological research on Black music. That's what he does. So it's a little bit about that too, about his understanding of European traditions and languages, but also African-American traditions and languages, meaning the vernacular of Black people and the different groups of Black people, what they do, what their music is, what's the culture of the music, what does it mean? So he's checking that out. So Europe is about all those things.
Was that something that inspired you to use this book as your pretext to work with the music? Because his interest in music was inspired quite young by his mother, and he eventually discovers ragtime. Was that an inspiration for you?
Yeah, I just thought that was interesting that the protagonist is a musician and that he's going through all these identity crises. I mean, he's trying to figure out himself and meaning as a Black person. And what does it mean to be African American? Because frankly, I'll just add this, my daughter said this, we're almost another tribe of the African diaspora. We are a mixture. We're culturally and genetically, if you want to stay there, indigenous people and European people, and actually Asians too. They're, if you want to call them Blasians, they're all kinds, but we're all included in Blackness here. And he's trying to figure out what that means. I also think largely we're all trying to figure, what does it mean to be an African American? There are all kinds of different factions, that's right.
Yeah.
Those that want to be Afrocentric, those that want to be, especially years ago, who want to be Eurocentric, those in between, trying to figure it out. Where do we play? What is this? As opposed to other immigrants who come here, they have a language they speak, they have food, they have clothes they wear. There's a geographical place where they can go from. That gives them strength when they come here. We don't have that. We're trying to figure it out still. Sorry to say that, right. But that's what this guy is to me. And that's what this Europe situation is when he goes there. And that's part of my reason for writing all this. There's something to do with that too.
So in movement 6, the Texan, the soldier. Oh, this really cooks. This is one that I won't put on the air, but
it will be live. I hate to say it.
It will be live.
Yeah.
So that conversation that takes place between the Texan and the soldier. You have solos by Jason Palmer on trumpet. Then the ensemble plays, the composition develops a darker tone. However, other listeners may hear something hopeful towards the end. That's what I'm getting from this. This particular movement, what was it for you? What was it about?
There's a longer discussion that starts in the book, but this is the most heated part.
Yes, it is.
So it's basically they're different actors who I think for Johnson's point of view are supposed to represent different parts of society. And they're arguing basically, what do these different parts of society think about the race question? Right. So it comes down to this sort of goes back to the juxtaposition question. The Northerners who see their Negro as a philosophical idea, something to be altruistic about, but don't know them personally. And then there's the Southerners who intimately know the Negro, but are not interested in his elevation in any sense, but they have very close ties to them. So that's who these people are. This is them acting out their ideas, feelings, political, personal, in an argument together. So that's the actualization of that, what started in juxtaposition. And it's a debate that's still going on now in some way. So that's what it is. There are all kinds of details you can think about it, but part of it is what is racial supremacy? Does it agree? Does it exist? Is there race at all? Was there race consciousness in antiquity? Probably not. Wasn't something that was developed in the 18th century, actually, by dividing the groups of people in races. Anyway, that's another discussion, but it's actually true.
One drop of blood.
So there's all this details about how many drops of blood makes you cross the line.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what about all those things and about what are the different contributions of different human societies to Uh, maybe I'll use the word civilization, but that word is loaded, but I'll just say civilization, or human beings being organized in something that uplifts the species. So that's what this is about. And of course, this is basically about, that's kind of what this particular is about. And that's being played out now, right? There's all kinds of issues. There's uh, East Asia and person, in China is rising. Europe, Europe is making second guessing itself. So is the West. So on and so. Anyway, blah blah blah. There's all kinds of details, but just what's gonna happen now? What's it gonna be like in 200 years? Who's gonna be the top dog?
The final sentence in this section that you selected says it all, as far as I'm concerned. It says, after all,
that's it all.
Racial supremacy is merely a matter of dates in history.
Yeah, and Johnson said it. He just laid it out. That's it.
He could have put that out and sold that, and it would have worked.
Yeah, exactly. He called it.
I'm curious, by the way, in Movement 7, the title Mother, Sister, Lover, it's an instrumental. Who's the recipient of this ballad?
It's written for the mother, so his mother, his relationship with her. His sister, the only time he sees his sister when he goes to Europe, he goes to I think it's an opera or a musical.
It's an opera.
Opera or a play.
Yeah.
Yes, an opera. He sees his father and then he sees his sister there.
Yeah.
So he has a moment. He's trying to figure
stirs him up quite a bit.
Quite a bit, yeah. So that, and then his wife, who he eventually marries, who at one point he tells her that he's of African descent. She freaks out, and then she figures it out. She goes back.
Yeah.
And they have a family. So it's about those women in this life.
Now, Movement 8, Pragmatism. Oh, I love that title. Pragmatism. What was your interpretation of the passage in your music? Can you share what your thinking was in the music that you presented in relating this thing that begins with, but there is one thing I did not mention. Among Negroes themselves, there is the peculiar inconsistency of a color question. And wraps up, it's no disgrace to be black, but it's often very inconvenient. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. After again, I read all these things first, and I came up with the titles later. Because sometimes it's hard to figure out exactly what they mean until you've written all the music and you feel it over time. So a lot of these are written, the titles and stuff I figured out later. I knew generally what they meant, but coming up with a specific name and all that and relating that to the prose and all that, it's something that happened afterward. All I can say is that Movement 9 is it's a sort of a two-part chorale, basically. So this is the one that's in two parts, two-part chorale, and then it goes into a melody with a sort of rubato section, right? So basically, it just lays out, it's a, how can I call it, a stoic section, where you're reflecting on what it means to be a person in a society where it's pressing against you, what kinds of decisions you have to make to survive. Basically that. And you can extrapolate about what those mean. So the chorale, that gives you, and there are two sections, right? One is the chorale with harmony, moving, and all that, with some tension. And then the other section is, it's open. There's a little bit more dissonant. The melody is somewhat dissonant. So on and so forth. You can figure out the rest out.
Sure.
It is difficult for me to analyze my feelings concerning my present position in the world. Sometimes it seems to me that I've never really been a Negro, that I've been only a privileged spectator of their inner life. At other times I feel that I've been a coward, a deserter, and I am possessed by a strange longing for my mother's people. Several years ago, I attended a great meeting in the interest of Hampton Institute at Carnegie Hall. Among the speakers, the greatest interest of the audience was centered on Booker T. Washington, and not because he so much surpassed the others in eloquence, but because of what he represented with so much earnestness and faith. Beside them, I feel small and selfish. I am an ordinarily successful white man who has made a little money. They are men who are making history and a race. I, too, might have taken part in a work so glorious. My love for my children makes me glad that I am what I am, and keeps me from desiring to be otherwise. And yet, I cannot repress the thought that, after all, I have chosen the lesser part, that I have sold my birthright for a mess of pottage.
And then in movement 9, I love that title, Identity Politics. Identity Politics. And in this, knowing the book is coming to a closing, I'm getting the sense that you somehow need to wrap up the musical story. It needs to come to some closure here. And then what follows is lift every voice and sing. And for my listeners, James Weldon Johnson wrote the lyrics to this. His brother wrote the music to this. And Lift Every Voice and Sing is now known, and it has been since the NAACP did this, of which James Weldon Johnson was the executive secretary. But they adopted it as the Black National Anthem. And it's played until you're done, and then it fades out. It's so, in its sense, it's a theatrical moment that lays down what this is all about. Musically, and then the text, the spot that you selected, to me, it closes it up very well. And I'm not too sure if there's a comment that needs to be made about that, but that's how it felt.
I think you got it. Sorry, I made a mistake. Sorry about the musical part. Part you just described is that's the one with the chorale, and then goes into the open part with tension. The other one was the 12/8 groove. Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry, pragmatism was more about just basically, how can I put it? That tune, there's a lot to that tune, but it's a very simple, straightforward tune. It's basically, the form is AAB. You're just basically walking straight through what you need to do in life and just getting it done. So, okay, then the second one has a chorale and all that. So, but you described it well. I mean, I don't have anything to add to that.
And then in movement 10 is the closure.
Yeah, it's recapitulation of the James Keith and all kinds of stuff.
That's right.
Development.
This was quite a project, and it's one that has had me thinking about this, and hearkening to even my own family, my mother's side of the family. They too had some family members who passed. And so when you know that there are others in your family who made that decision, and then others who, like my mother and her immediate family, chose not to, and followed through in their lives just the way that an African American would live.
Yeah.
With all its ups and downs and crevices and happiness and troubles. This is something that they decided we want to be a part of the Black culture, or as our son calls it, passing while Black. Passing while Black. Interesting, isn't it?
That is interesting.
The band that you have been working with, what do you have in the future for that? Or do you anticipate taking on another project like this? You have Terrence Blanchard has done a lot of film, and Wayne Shorter and Esperanza Spalding and a number of other jazz figures who have taken on major projects that turn into operas. Anything that you have moving in that direction, or are you going to return to the standard format of a jazz ensemble?
I'm always going to have jazz ensembles, standard format, but I'm not going to stop doing that, whatever it is, cordless or not. But I do plan on doing something like this again. I'm already starting to write it. That's based on Octavia Butler's work. So
excellent.
I'm going to do another one. Yeah. It's going to be about 11 or 12 movements.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, she wrote 11 novels. I might do 12 because 12 is a good number. Because she wrote one more book of short stories. So I might continue that. So that's what's going to be doing like that.
That's exciting to hear.
Yeah.
Is Giant Step Arts, are you going to continue to work with Jimmy and his crew?
Absolutely. And if he's down, if Giant Step Arts is down, I'd probably do this with them. But we'll see how it goes. I don't know if they want to do any more studio projects. Depends. They usually do live things. But I'll continue working with them because I'm on sideman projects with them. I'll be doing other stuff. Yeah.
Great project. I have an interesting question here. I was going through some video that you've been a part of. I saw what I thought, let's put it this way. The piece that I saw that you were performing John Coltrane's Resolution.
Oh, at a wedding?
At a wedding. What was that about?
It was probably I had to be in the late 90s.
That's what it looked like.
Yeah, I was just at my friend's wedding, and I love Train, of course, but at that time I was trying to take other things. I was transcribing other people, and my friend at the time who was getting married loved Train, and he just, said, "Come on, man, come on. I know you're not doing that right now, but can you just play Resolution?" So I just thought that's what it was. So I was like, all right, I'll do it. So that's what that was.
I loved it. I loved it. Love Supreme is my favorite piece of John Coltrane's.
Oh, yeah, of course.
It has to be.
What are you going to say?
What makes John Coltrane.
That's right. Exactly.
And I thought your interpretation was exciting, and you poured it out just right.
Yeah, very kind.
I was thinking John Coltrane would have enjoyed this.
Well, hope so. I mean,
oh, no. Look, thank you, Mark. I've taken up a lot of your time, and I want to thank you so very much for this conversation.
Oh, thank you.
Mark Turrner can be found on some stage, big or small, in some community, near or far. He is the consummate traveler, high in demand around the world. If you discover that Mark Turrner is near you, check him out. That will surely be an experience you'll hold dear for years. Thanks to Ann Braithwaite of Braithwaite & Katz and Jimmy Katz and Giant Step Arts for helping to make this interview happen. The theme music is by Johannes Wallman from the composition McCoy from his album Precarious Towers. This podcast plays only music that has been authorized for me to use. Support the artist by purchasing their music. That is how they make a living. And support live jazz wherever you are. Please subscribe. You'll be the first to know when new content is available. Thanks again for listening. I'm Steve Browngen.